I'm going to create this image in Blender in about 12 minutes in real time. And I'll start by deleting the default cube and the light. And then I'm going to use the add-on Blenderkit. It's both in a paid version and a free version. I'm using the paid version. There you can have access to several different 3D objects. I'm going for the skull. If you have the free version, you have access to less than in the paid version. But in the free version, you still have access to many great things. So I can really recommend just trying it out. I'm going to add some riverstone to the scene. That's going to be basically the floor of this cave I'm building. I'm not really sure that riverstone have ever been in a cave, but now they have in this case. So just starting to build the scene, and I'm going for the back wall. I'm choosing something called sandstone. And then I'm going to put the camera in the right place. So moving kind of fast. And yeah, that's important to get it right. I'm going to dial down the focal length to like around 30, it's 32. And just adjusting the rocks. And I'm going to place some of them in the background. And later on also some in the foreground as well. It's just so they are kind of like positioned a little bit higher than in the foreground. And then I'm going to scale up the skull to make it like this giant skull lying on, see, on the ground inside the cave. And the guy I'm going to add in a minute, who's going to make this curry. It takes a little while for me to get the skull in the right position, so you can see I'm kind of like messing around with it. I use G a lot to move it around, and I'll use R, you can see, to rotate it. And that's some of the shortcuts I use a lot. And if you're new to Blender, or even if you tried it for a while, then I can recommend learning some of the shortcuts. It can be a bit intimidating at first, but when you tried it, making the same things over and over again, then suddenly you will just do it automatically. And when I'm like doing the scene, this is in real time, then I'm not really thinking about now I have to press this button and now I have to do this. It's just almost working automatically. So yeah. And of course, sometimes I make mistakes. I mess something up. That happens. But yeah. Here I have split the screen in two. So in the left part, we have the camera view. And on the right part, I can just move around, and then I can see on the left part when I'm moving things, if it's positioned okay. And it can be really helpful to sometimes split the screen. Of course, it depends on how big the screen is that you're working on, if it really can make sense for you. But for in this case, it can be really helpful. Of course, you can go in and out of the camera view, but that sometimes takes a little while. Now I added a guy to the scene. You can go to File and import him as an object or PBX file or something else, but I'm just copying him over from, I have opened another Blender program, and I'm just copy pasted him in. So I bought this guy from a place called Humano. Put a link in the description. It has all sorts of models. But of course, in Blenderkit, it Blenderkit also has models that you can download and use. But I wanted this guy because I wanted him to hold the torch. And right now he's holding an umbrella. So you can go in the right side and just untick the eye and the render icon. So now the umbrella is gone, and if we're going to render, it's not going to render the umbrella. So yeah, now he can get a torch a little later on. I moved some of the rocks to the foreground. If you've seen some of the other videos, you'll probably know that I like to have something in the foreground. So, and also kind of like I, I have been taking pictures for many years, and it's like um, it's kind of like the same workflow to have something in the foreground, the middle ground, the background, and something that you, of course, see a little later on focus on or focus on demand. And then we get this kind of rocks in the foreground, a little blurred out, and the rocks or the wall in the background also blurred out. So that's kind of like the way that I'm building up the image. You can see I go to depth of field and I click on the man and just go for an f-stop of f.2. Maybe that was a little low. Could have chosen a higher f-stop in this situation, but that was what I went with here. And now you can see that we have this cave thing. I'm going for cycles, render view, and I'm just going to add lights. And that's something that I can spend a lot of time on. This is kind of like I'm working fast in this scene, but if it wasn't for kind of like a showcase like here, I would probably spend a little more time on it. But it is just to show what you're able to achieve in like these 12 minutes I'm using. I chose to close the windows on the left side, so I just have one window, and you can see the blue light coming from the left part. And I added another blue light to the other side. And it kind of like looks a little bit flat right now, the picture, but we're going to add more lights to make it come alive. And I also wanted some highlights on the guy, on his coat, on the back of his coat. And I also wanted some highlights on the skull. So you can probably be a little hard to see, but he has it right now, but not enough, and I'm going to adjust that later on. Then I chose to take a light and put it on the background, so it illuminates the wall, the cave wall in the background. And I'm going to move it up a bit. And it also, if you can see on the skull, it also creates a little highlight on the top of the skull, kind of like separating it from the back. And now I can see that it's not filling out the frame, but now it is. So just G to grab it and just move it into position. And now the frame is the wall and background is filling out the frame. Then I go for an orange light, and if you've seen some of my other videos, you will know that that's kind of like a way that I work many times. Blue and orange, that's great colors to work with. And I go for 300, a power for 300, and just getting the light into position. And it's going to be where the torch is going to be. So it's kind of like helping the torch. You can see, even though he's not holding anything right now, you can see there's some kind of light coming from there. Yeah, and then I'm going to use Vrue VDB, and it's an add-on also. I'll put a link in the description, and it has all kinds of fire things. I have bought this torch that I import into the scene, and it's animated, so it will actually the fire would actually move if you were to make an animation. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, and now I just have to put the torch into his hand, and I have to avoid the flames hitting him in the head. It would be unfortunate and probably not very nice to have like these, to have his head burned off. So That's not the kind of video we're making today. So yes, and then we can put it in his hand. And if you can see, his hand is not that detailed. You can see it's a little clumpy, but it doesn't really matter because we're going to be the camera is so far away that we're not going to see the details of his hand. And it's also going to be a little bit dark in the cave, so it doesn't matter. Yes, go back to rendered view. And I can see that some of the rocks are blocking a little bit for the skull. I'm just going to make the foreground, let the foreground be there, but not kind of like take away the shine from the skull. And then I think that the torch is still a little bit too close to his hand, so I'm not sure. Maybe I'll move it a little bit around. But probably forgot to move the light, so it doesn't really make sense. So, but anyways, that's an option you have to kind of like position it to make it in the right place. And yeah, now the scene is there, and I was actually kind of like ready to render it out, but I was just going to say I wasn't completely satisfied with the scene, so I moved the lights a little bit closer to him to make a better headlights or catch lights on his jacket, and also on the other side I just pulled the lights a little closer. You see on the side, just going to put a little closer to highlight the skull a little better. And I thought that was an improvement, but I'm not sure anybody else would notice it, but but I did, and that's important. Yeah, and then it's just to render out the scene. Just making sure the highlights are there. Yes, perfect. And then we go, boom. We have the render. And yeah, didn't take that long to make the scene. And it's okay. You can also see the lights, and I'll throw it in to Photoshop and just messed around a little bit with the colors. So you get a little more bluish and a little bit more pungent orange. So this is the scene, and it took about 12 minutes, and you can probably do it a little bit faster because I was messing up some places. But that's a way to use, for instance, Blenderkit to make a scene rather fast. Thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe if you find this entertaining or amusing or whatever.